About 2 years ago, my daughter came to me and she said, "Dad, I have a joke. Dad, why is there no aspirin in the jungle?" I said, "I'm not sure, why?" She said, "Dad, the reason there's no aspirin in the jungle is the parrots ate them all." I'm not sure if you've ever taken a prescription into a pharmacy in Australia only to find that there was no medicine on the shelf. An unlikely occurrence in Australia. In Pacific Island countries, the World Health Organization and AusAid tell us that more than 10 million people have irregular access to medicines. One of the main reasons for this irregular access is that the health personnel responsible for this activity do not have the skills and knowledge they need to do it properly. In 1946, a gentleman by the name of Lewin said, "Research that stays in a book is rubbish." I want to talk about action research that's producing change. Action research in my context involves myself working with health professionals, academics and Ministry of Health officials to look for change in this context. We're doing this in 3 ways. The first is looking at cultural ways of learning and teaching, and together we've discovered 20 principles that influence teaching that should be considered when training. One of these is making sure that we teach in teams. The second is to make sure that examples chosen are specifically relevant to the Pacific. And the third is to make sure that any training materials put together have in fact examples relevant to the local context. The second activity we've done together is gone into health facilities, hospitals and aid posts and actually observe what people do. We've mapped the skills and the knowledge required by these people in order to do their job properly. So we have an understanding of what's required with the culture. We have an understanding of what these people do. And together we've used these insights to assess the training material that's currently being used. And we've realised there are lots of problems. The training that's currently used doesn't cover the skills and knowledge required. The way it's taught is not relevant, and so the skills and knowledge of these health personnel are not being developed. This has laid a platform that we are now moving forward together as a team where we are going to consider the skills and knowledge in the country context in the Pacific. We're going to consider the best ways of learning and teaching and come up with new methods so that we can develop the skills of the health personnel to deliver medicine supply better, to go from that empty cupboard to be able to taking medicine off the shelf. The reason we want to do this is not to have research that has a way of researching that has evidence that's in a book, but what we want to do is to really have research that engages the people around us, in the Pacific specifically, so that we have action research that's producing change. Thank you.
Native fish populations in the Murray-Darling Basin are less than 10% of their pre-European settlement levels, and more than 46 of the endangered species are listed as threatened or endangered. As the degradation of rivers by humans continues worldwide, reservoirs will become important refuges for conserving threatened fish in the future. The recent drought prompted a decision by the ACT government to enlarge Cotter Reservoir to 20 times its current size to secure water for Canberra's ever-growing population. My project will help to answer some of the unknown questions surrounding the biological and physical processes that will occur as the reservoir is filling. Macquarie perch are a nationally endangered species, and the only viable population of Macquarie perch left in the ACT, and only one of few across Australia, resides in the current Cotter Reservoir. In the current reservoir, Macquarie perch depend on aquatic plants for food and shelter. But as the reservoir fills, these aquatic plants will become submerged, some under more than 50 metres of water, leaving the fish with very little shelter from cormorant predation and an uncertainty in food resources. By examining stomach contents from fish and also the available food resources, I expect to find a significant shift in diet as the reservoir is filling. Macquarie perch can also utilise a range of other habitat types, including structural woody habitat and constructed rock reefs. As a result, the terrestrial vegetation is being left in the inundation zone, and 7 kilometres of rock reefs have been constructed around the reservoir. As the terrestrial vegetation becomes flooded, the bacteria and fungi breaking down this vegetation will use up a lot of oxygen in the water, We are worried that there will be a depletion in dissolved oxygen as the reservoir is filling. This depletion in dissolved oxygen is of particular concern to the Macquarie perch, as it will drive them towards the surface of the reservoir and leave them prone to cormorant predation. Since the construction of reservoirs in this day and age is fairly rare, especially in Australia, my project will help to answer some of the questions surrounding the biological and physical processes that will occur as the reservoir is filling. And results from this study will be used to enhance the survival of threatened fish in the future. Thanks.
How much do you really know about sexual harassment in the workplace? Employees, do you know your rights? Employers, do you know your responsibilities? Sexual harassment has been illegal in this country for more than 25 years. Surely your answers to my questions must be yes. Yet just a few short years ago, the Australian Human Rights Commission conducted a nationwide telephone survey which suggested a few unexpected no answers to my questions. 1 in 5 of the respondents who said they had never experienced sexual harassment went on to describe having been subjected to behaviours that did constitute sexual harassment under the law. My research asks the question, why? Despite decades of law reform, have our workplaces really moved on from the world of predatory bosses and exploited secretaries seen recently in TV's Mad Men? My thesis is about justice in the workplace and the messages that judges and the media are giving to the general public about what sexual harassment is. I investigate the way the media reports and perhaps distorts certain high-profile cases, as this is where most people will get their information about the law. I also look at how the law operates in practice by analysing what judges say about which complainants are good or genuine victims and which harassing behaviours constitute real sexual harassment. My method? I'm assessing a sample of sexual harassment cases from a range of different jurisdictions to analyse how judicial officers assess the credibility of witnesses, if any comments were made about the appropriateness of the complainant's response to harassing behaviour, and if the complainant's personal relationships were considered relevant evidence. I'm also analysing a sample of news articles about high-profile sexual harassment cases, including the infamous David Jones case, and assessing the portrayal of the parties to the case, the legal accuracy of the reporting, and whether this reporting reflects gender biases and stereotypes. I strongly believe that a just workplace is an essential part of a just society, as work makes up a very substantial part of our lives. I hope that my thesis will improve community understanding of sexual harassment and access to justice, and that employers and employees alike can be more confident in how much they really know. Thank you.
I'm sure the next time you pay a visit to your GP, medical specialist, allied health practitioner or other health professional, that you would have a natural expectation of receiving the latest scientifically proven therapies. My research indicates that is not likely. Only 14% of research findings actually reach clinicians. But more significantly, it takes on average 17 years for those research findings to be taken up into clinical practice. Take the Ponseti approach for the treatment of clubfoot. Dr. Ponseti was a physician and he was able to clearly demonstrate you can get much better outcomes by using serial plasters instead of surgery. But it took more than 30 years for his approach to be adopted. We can improve cancer morbidity by 30% by applying what we know. We can reduce cancer mortality by 10% by using state-of-the-art therapies. And statins, used to lower blood cholesterol and morbidity and mortality post-stroke, are being underprescribed. And antibiotics, used for the treatment of respiratory conditions, are being overprescribed. The list goes on. Why is this happening? My research has identified 3 important realities. 1, Researchers and health practitioners are living separate lives. 2, the divide is wide, described as a chasm. And 3, crossing that gap is not easy. This research-practice gap is resulting in health services which are either suboptimal, not necessary, or even harmful. And that means wasted expenditure for a health system already under significant financial pressure. My work is tackling this gap head-on with a 3-pronged attack. Firstly, it's establishing researcher and health practitioner networks, promoting collaboration and sharing of knowledge. Secondly, it's implementing a range of enablers, including education strategies, reminders, incentives, media campaigns, and online learning. And thirdly, it's actively addressing barriers, doing something about the negative attitude towards research, assisting with the lack of confidence and skills with implementing new techniques, accommodating the vast volume of new research findings, and changing the format of journals so they can be better understood. My actions will effectively reduce the research practice gap, increasing the use of scientifically proven therapies, increasing the quality of care for less. And that can mean just one thing: better health for you and me.
Hi, I'm here to throw the light on one of the major concerns which is totally taking world in action. As in 21st century is moving ahead with the booming technology exponentially, there is somewhere the dark side of the stress life which is directly impacting our supercontroller brain. According to facts, 70% of the population is still suffering from mild to severe brain abnormalities and diseases due to various reasons: stress, food, etc. One of the surprising facts is that in our healthy life, 80% of the populations don't know what's going in their brain. And they come to know when the symptoms comes for their brain abnormalities and disorders in front, showing some brain abnormalities. Due to this unawareness of the situations of the brain, the severe diseases like the Alzheimer and Huntington's are creating a problem for us, making our life trouble. And the bad problem is that it will not be cared for in the later on stage. So my research is based on the early diagnosis of the brain abnormalities using the 3D MRI images. Normally, the current scenario is if anybody has a brain abnormality, then the patient goes through the MRI scan of the images using CT scans machines, and the doctor uses their expertise and skills to find out the brain abnormality and using some specific standard. My idea of research is to design an automatic software which can automatically find out the brain abnormality of the brain using some special segmentation algorithms and give the output in a 3D model design if there is any abnormal section of the brain. Following on my research, anyone can trace down the early diagnosis of the brain abnormality in the brain section, and the early treatment could be provided so that the brain abnormal sections would be removed out. As I'm also in the process of designing the software application for Android and also on the iPhone application to provide more portability and easiness for the remote size area where the clinics are not available. The whole process and the model is being supported by lots of worldwide community and appreciated, and I'm also in the process of integrating with research organizations like CSIRO, MHRC, and different organizations for commercial use. In the end, the software is, the whole process provides a unique type of innovation which is never used till now. Because as brain is healthy, life is healthy. Life is healthy, everyone is healthy. Thank you.
Our lives, our knowledge, our communities, our civilization are preserved by many documents, maps, books, and records. The preservation of old paper and books is important because without it, we wouldn't be able to understand our past. My research, paper conservation, builds up on hundreds of years of experience and experiments. But paper deteriorates easily. Most old manuscripts suffer from physical, chemical, and biological deterioration. Exposing old documents and making them available to the public accelerates the deterioration process. Paper conservation science looks at ways to not only preserve, but also rehabilitate paper documents. Mostly, Japanese tissue paper is used for repairing purposes. Japanese paper is strong and flexible and can easily be applied to documents in various formats, such as hinging, attaching the cover to the book, or repairing page tears. To ensure Japanese paper matches the colors of the document to be repaired, it is colored using both natural and synthetic dyes. Iranian paper conservators use green walnut shell, black tea, and henna. Australian paper conservators, on the other hand, prefer using watercolor pigments. But we don't know which technique is the more durable. And this may depend on the antimicrobial properties of dyes used. My research identifies the potential antimicrobial properties of plant dyes, such as black tea, henna, eucalyptus leaves, and watercolor pigments when used on Japanese paper for paper conservation. Molecular techniques such as DNA and PCR assays will be used to do this. Molecular techniques have provided amazing results when used in forensic science, but their application to paper conservation is new. Microbial tests will enable me to examine the existence of microorganisms and the durability of dyed samples over time. Such findings can help me to find out which group of colorants are best for long-term paper conservation. In this way, my PhD can help preserve and safeguard old manuscripts from biological attacks. This will allow old manuscripts, which are a part of our history and civilization, like Captain Cook diaries and Shakespeare dramas, to be preserved for generations to come. Thank you.
Virtual communities can be described as online communities of persons with various interests, like Facebook and YouTube, where people can share and exchange information. They have become integral to our daily life. I believe almost all of us here will have some experience using virtual communities. But have you ever wondered what factors encouraged or stopped you from using virtual communities? And would your answer be the same as everyone else? In my research, I'm trying to determine what factors will influence employees' adoption of virtual communities in Chinese organizations. To achieve this objective, I have developed my own research model to examine 12 different variables in 4 dimensions, which are organizational, individual, social, and political. The data will be collected through online surveys, which will help me reach more respondents who are using virtual communities. When I first started my research, someone has asked me, "Lily, why did you choose this topic?" My answer was, "China's big, and everyone wants to learn more about China." Well, that wasn't a professional answer. However, it is true, especially since Chinese markets are so attractive to global organizations. In fact, many Chinese organizations, they have been also attracted by the ability of virtual communities to develop broader relationships with their stakeholders and reduce entry barriers to overseas marketplaces. Unfortunately, the expected benefits are often obstructed by the unwillingness of their employees to adopt virtual communities. Well, to the best of my knowledge, my research will be the first studies the adoption of virtual communities from a Chinese management perspective. The results will provide a sound basis for gaining insights into the determining factors for the adoption of virtual communities, which will help organizations better engage their employees to improve their productivities, and eventually, it will help them to improve their effectiveness and efficiency in business operations within China and globally. Thank you.
Cystic fibrosis, asthma, diabetes, anxiety, depression, epilepsy, heart defects, cancer. Nearly 15% of Australian students are living with a chronic illness. Perhaps you know one of these children. Perhaps you were one of these children. How do they cope with pain and fatigue, with time-consuming and invasive medical procedures, and yet still attempt to succeed at school? Adolescents with chronic illness have a number of areas of specific educational need. They're dealing with learning difficulties that have been caused by chronic pain and fatigue, by school absence, peer rejection, school avoidance, school phobia. In my research, I'm investigating ways that we can improve equity of access to education for students with chronic illness. The average child without a chronic illness is absent from school for 3 days a year. 2 of the students that I work with were both absent for over a term each. How can this fail to impact on their learning? Adolescents with chronic illness value teachers who take the time to connect with them, and thus they value the learning offered by those teachers. And so my research begins with teachers. I'm currently working in a Canberra school to discover more about how teachers manage the frequent and yet intermittent absences of students with chronic illness. What tools do teachers currently use to manage these absences? What gaps can they identify in their current practice? What are the barriers between teachers and students with chronic illness? And what are the digital tools that are available to us to break down these barriers? What are teachers willing to do in terms of personal and professional development to assist in managing these absences? Success at school, while valuable in its own right, is also a vital component of success in many other areas. All of our students, all of our children deserve a chance at that success.